What do you do if you have a dog that initially targets the tug well, hits the center of the tug, but then once you're playing, the dog wants to move on the tug, either slides back or moves laterally, bites your fingers, that kind of stuff while they're doing it. It depends a little bit on my assessment of why they're doing it, right? So dogs slip or chew on a tug for different reasons. Some of it is a genetic style. Some dogs have a very active mouth, and when they're stimulated, they chomp a lot as they're playing. They want to re-grip, and if you're too still, they're trying to re-grip. Other dogs, sometimes you're playing with a tug that's too hard for them, and so they hit it, and if it's too firm for their jaw strength, they'll slide back, and then when they try to re-grip, sometimes that turns into moving. And dogs that want to move to the handle, sometimes that comes from early training where young dogs were put on, like when we're teaching tugging initially, we cut handles off our tugs. I actually now finally have them made without handles, but all the foundations work with no handles on the tugs because you have to fold those up. If I'm holding a tug, the handles are hanging out and those move as you're playing, and a lot of dogs in the beginning are drawn to the movement, so they try to bite the handles. Also, if they hit the tug and it's a little too firm and they slip off, and they get the handle's easier to hold on to than the tug itself is. And then that can become a habit. They seek the end of the toy because it's easier to hold on at the end. So if I determine that it's an inappropriate toy for your dog, then I would try a toy without handles and a softer toy that has the best place to bite, the easiest place to bite is in the middle of it. And then if I determine it's a genetic style, well then there's not much you can do. Sometimes those dogs, the dogs that are chompy and things like that, do well if you move onto a ball and a string because they come off all the time. So if the dog's biting good and hard with lots of energy, then sometimes if you put them on a firmer ball and a string, you need to make sure they don't bite the string, right? But if you put them on a firmer ball and a string, then they can't chew and hold on to it, and they learn to kind of clamp down. So if the dogs have drive and they slip off repeatedly, sometimes the frustration makes them work harder to stay on it. Other dogs can start to feel defeated by that or can start to target the string. Another thing you can do for a bit is do some of the restrained play stuff that we did, like I did with Cindy's dog yesterday. You have the dog on a harness and have somebody hold the dog while you play so you can keep tension on the toy. You saw when I'm controlling tension on a toy when you're playing loose with a dog, so some of it's just sometimes if you're too still when you're tugging, there's no energy in the toy, and the dog will chew around. They'll move around on the toy. So I can combat that by keeping it going, right? You saw me kind of keep moving and swinging the dog around like this, and I'm kind of not stopping. By doing that, I'm keeping a constant tension on the dog's mouth. It feels like it's being pulled out of the dog's mouth, and so the dog can't chew, and they stay there. But as soon as you start to slow down or get static, they can move again. And so you can manage that sometimes by how you play, but that's very labor intensive. Like, it's really tiring. You got to keep moving, keep going. So the restrained play, though, can help with some dogs as well. So I might experiment a little bit with that. Get the dog used to a harness, have somebody hold that, and then put a little tension on that line while you play. The person can actually follow you around. It doesn't have to be stationary. Somebody can follow you with the line, and while you're playing, if the dog starts to chew, they just pull a little, and if the dog feels like, ooh, I'm going to get pulled off, and if they lose it, they stop, and you jump back and tease the dog again. Say, ooh, you lost it, you better hold on, right? But I did first experiment with make sure the toy is not too firm for the dog, right? It's a challenging thing sometimes. A lot of the tugs, I wind up having a whole bunch of different tug toys, right? From really soft all the way up to firm ones, and a whole bunch of gradients in between. And once the dogs get to a certain point, it really doesn't matter. They'll play with anything. If I do my job right, the dogs don't care what the toy is. They'll play with any kind of toy, hard, soft, and they'll hopefully they have good play skills, all that kind of good. But while you're developing a dog, the right toy can make a huge difference, right? And one that's a little too soft for a certain dog can promote chewing. It's also softer toys are harder to make rules on. Yesterday when we showed how we're teaching the dogs to let go and to out and all those things, immobilizing it and that kind of thing is hard with a soft toy because they can make it move. Even if you're trying to hold it still, they can make action there. They get satisfaction from the toy, they can dig in. So there's certain types of things that are harder to do on a soft toy, and then there are other things that are easier, right? where a dog that's developing its jaw strength and learning to play, if I put it on the wrong toy, it can learn bad habits. It can bite, it can't hold on, so it keeps slipping back and it starts holding with the front of its mouth instead of the back of its mouth, or it starts moving, or it actually starts to lose interest and enthusiasm. It's like, I'm trying, but I can't. This is too big or too stiff for my jaw strength and development is. So play around a little bit with different toy types and see. The idea that the dog's hitting it in the center and then sliding back, dogs do that sometimes out of a genetic biting style, but they also do that sometimes when the toy's too hard for them.